about the powers of the legislature in respect of the appropriation bill laid before it, under the carpet. The Constitution appears a bit silent on this subject, of course, despite the fact that it requires legislative approval for the withdrawal of monies from the Consolidated Revenue Fund, as well as the expenditure of public resources.
Well, a school of thought holds that the legislature can reduce but not increase the total amount of the budget, because an increase is a usurpation of the powers of the executive to initiate and present the budgetary estimates to the assembly. Well, this school of thought has not provided answers to situations where the executive meets out appropriating basic expenditures on such issues as personnel, for instance, to an MDA, or appropriating for critical infrastructure. Should the legislature in such an instance not correct same, or should it merely be a rubber stamp?
That's not a question for us. But Kingsley, another school of thought holds the view that the legislature is at liberty to amend, meaning increasing or reducing the executive's budget proposal, since what is laid before it is a mere proposal in form of a bill, estimates.
All right, so that brings us back again to the earlier questions that we posed at the beginning of the conversation that's between Claire and I. Does the National Assembly have the power to alter the budgetary estimates prepared by the executive? What are the limits of the National Assembly's power of appropriation, and how can this, of course, be taken care of going forward? Of course, we'll be expecting the 2018 appropriation by October, when they start preparing, when the estimates are expected to be submitted to the National Assembly.
Well, Kingsley, that is the task that we'll put before our guests today. And of course, I'm not a lawyer, but of course, with the experience of Kingsley here, who also happens to be a lawyer, you can rest assured that this subject will be severely dealt with. Justice will be done to it. On that note, like we say, we're the reason, of course, you're the reason why we're here. It's a very good morning to you and welcome to the program. Good Morning Nigeria. It's coming to you live from the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network. There's no doubt about it. I am Claire Adelabu Abdulrazak.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join Claire in also welcoming you to today's edition of the program, in the course of which we shall bring you our regular complimentary segments, including newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and of course the other segments. We're kicking off right now, and our newscaster this morning is Laurie Bala Hassan. Hi, Laurie.
Hi, Kingsley. Hi, Claire.
Hi, Laurie.
Good morning and a warm welcome to the news. The 2017 budget of over 7.44 trillion naira passed by the National Assembly has been signed into law. Acting President Yemi Osinbajo, who signed the bill, described it as an important milestone in the nation's economic recovery and growth plan.
You're all aware our economy is already signaling a gradual recovery as growth is headed towards positive territory. I'm confident that the 2017 budget will deliver economic growth and prosperity, one that is self-sustaining and inclusive.
The federal government seeks to change the current landscape of domestic refining in Nigeria by setting a target to exit product importation by the end of 2019. This commitment was given by the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Ibe Kachukwu, when he appeared before the Senate Joint Committee on Petroleum Resources on ways to finding lasting solution to petroleum product supply challenges in Nigeria.
With all that, just to find out what the difficulties are, because we have a duty to help them, help us get to that finish line. And I was very glad for Dangote to be saying that they're targeting meeting the 2019 timeline. Fantastic, because that would cover a big area of my worry, which is the gap between the NPC refinery.
Acting President Yemi Osinbajo has cautioned that unless social issues are given attention by the coalition of the executive, legislature, judiciary and civil society, nations will continue to witness agitations for share of natural resources. He stated this at a 3-day conference on law, security and national development organized by Nigerian law teachers holding at the Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Awka, Anambra State.
We often characterize these personal deprivations as ethnic or religious agitation. The right to a decent existence, to education, to healthcare or jobs must not depend on how loudly my ethnic or religious group agitates. Certainly not. These are my rights as a citizen of Nigeria. It is the failure of the state to deliver on these essentials of life and livelihood that compels our people to run to their tribal and religious camps to seek succor by way of agitation.
And as the world marks Day Against Child Labor, the Senate has reiterated commitment towards ensuring ratification of all laws that will help combat child labor. The Senate President Bukola Saraki stated this when the International Labour Organization country officer in Nigeria paid him a courtesy call.
Issues concerning the child, the Child Rights Act, violence against children, and of course the issue of child labor as well. So I hope that we'll be able to work closely together.
The humanitarian activities of the future assured of the wife of the president, Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, of supporting women and children, received a boost from the People's Republic of China. A check of 60 million naira was formally presented to the wife of the president in support of the program.
Other well-meaning Nigerians, both at national and international, will come to continue to support what Her Excellency is doing so that she will continue to do the good work under the Future Assured program.
As part of measures to inculcate adherence to traffic rules and regulations in the country, the Federal Road Safety Corps is to commence a psychiatric test on traffic offenders from 1st of July 2017. Corps Marshal Boboye Oyeyemi stated this at the second phase training of its personnel on non-motorized transportation in Abuja.
Fatal crashes due to traffic light violation, people jumping the traffic light, I think is a crass responsibility. There is need for us to be more careful. So it's a no-go area. When they are fit, then they go back for drivers retraining program. They will still pay the fine, but it's to take it from the issue of psychology.
The Nigerian Television Authority has been commended for complying with the provisions of the Federal Character Commission Act in its nominal role. The NTA management received the commendation from the Senate Committee on Federal Character when it appeared before it to provide explanations on personnel recruitments.
Record of the nominal, let me also say that I don't see anything so alarming at all. Of your personal account.
Nigeria has promised to assist neighboring Niger Republic to drive its digital switchover project. Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, made the promise in Abuja when he granted audience to the Minister of Communication from Niger, Madam Kubara Sani.
To cooperate, we're ready to assist our sister country, and we are going to make available to them the legal framework which we have adopted in Nigeria, which is the white paper on digitalization. We hope it will be going to be very useful to them. We will also ensure that before they leave, they interact with both the signal distributors, the set-top box manufacturers, and also the content providers.
And that's the news for now. Claire and Kingsley will be back after this break. Good morning.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, Only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Whenever pain occurs, you want quick relief. Try new Nurofen Express. It goes to the source of pain and gets to work in under 15 minutes. That's why Nurofen Express delivers fast and effective relief. New Nurofen Express works at the source of pain. Fast.
Being a mom is great, but when your child has a fever, you don't know what to do. I trust Nurofen for Children to take care of my child's pain and fever.
Effective relief you can trust.
Pump it up while your feet are stomping and the jam is pumping. Look at the crowd is jumping. Pump up the jam and push up your hand. You know, say me fans, they plenty like sun. Jump up and dance, make them understand. Say me energy could have never be contraband. Them say me hype and excited because no boy can hype like me. All of my fans, them invited.
Right, welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria, and we move on now to business. We understand mining summit opens in Abuja, but financial development institutions are predicting economic growth in Africa to reach about 3.4% in 2017, that's this year, and 4.3% in 2018. Joy Uzo will bring us all the details of this and more stories.
Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining us on the Business News segment. More than 150 firms and top-level participants in the mining industry are in Abuja, the nation's capital, for the first West Africa Construction and Mining Summit, which coincides with the Nigerian National Mining Summit. The summit, with a theme on earthing Nigeria's mining sector, is apt as the country sets to diversify our economy. The conference will serve as a platform for stakeholders to brainstorm on business prospects as well as display of leading mining technology. Oil prices gained on Monday following last week's drop of nearly 4% as traders look ahead to the weekly update on U.S. petroleum supplies as well as monthly reports on U.S. shale crude production and global output figures from OPEC and the International Energy Agency due out this week. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and the African Development Bank, AFDB, expect economic growth in Africa to pick up this year and next. Presenting their latest forecast at the sidelines of a G20 Africa Summit in Berlin, both organizations forecast gross domestic product GDP to expand by 3.4% this year after 2.2% in the previous year. For 2018, OECD and AFDB expect the upturn to gain further momentum with a predicted expansion rate of 4.3%. The African Capacity Building Foundation, the continent's leading capacity development institution, has pledged to use its expertise to help regional economic communities, RECs, achieve their objective of integrating Africa and leveraging its sustainable development. Executive Secretary of the Foundation, Professor Emmanuel Nnadozie, said the RECs, if well capacitated, will be able to effectively coordinate the implementation of the first 10 years of the action plan of African Union's Agenda 2063 and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. At a just-ended retreat for regional economic communities in Abuja, Professor Nnadozie said ACBF's assistance to the communities would be in collaboration with partners such as the New Partnership for Africa's Development Agency, NEPAD Agency, and the International Institute for Democratic and Electoral Assistance.
We were working on this Agenda 2063 these issues were on our minds. We made sure that it was not something like the other things, so that it wouldn't be something that replaces NEPAD or replaces African peer review mechanism or replaces the agendas of the regional economic communities. Instead, we say this should be something that brings together all these things. so that we use those decisions and those agreements as milestones.
He said ACBF has published knowledge products to meet the capacity needs of the communities. A major recommendation in the 2014 ACR report is that the RECs emulate the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, in establishing a trust fund to which member states and development partners will contribute in order to enhance internal capacities, resource planning, mobilization and utilization. The Abuja retreat was organized by ACBF, International IDEA and ECOWAS, and was attended by representatives of most of the 8 African Union recognized RECs. And now a quick look at details of trading on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And that's it on Business News. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, Joy Uzo, for the business package. Next for us, we'll go to the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
All right, thank you for joining us and, of course, staying tuned to NTA and to your program, Good Morning Nigeria. My pleasure now to introduce our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyebe. I haven't seen you in ages, but of course I've been watching you do.
I thought we saw only about 2 months ago. 2 months is now ages. Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Kingsley. And good morning, Nigeria.
Pleasure to have you join us, Bayo. Let's go straight to the front pages as should be expected. The stories on the assent by the acting president to the 2017 appropriation bill is a story that dominates the front pages of some of the papers that we have. Of course, in various forms, the papers have captured it. Daily Trust is our first paper. Lead story says, Oshibanjo signs 2017 budget. And 2 writers says executive will seek environment and experts want aggressive implementation. And the photograph there on the front page also shows the signing ceremony yesterday at the presidential villa. The acting president, of course, see him there, and then you have the Senate President, Speaker of the House, the Minister of Budget and Planning, Minister of Finance, as well as Chief of Staff to the President. Now, above the lead story, that's below the nameplate of the Daily Trust newspaper, you have DSS in mass arrests of kidnappers and terrorists. DSS in mass arrests of kidnappers and terrorists. Details of the story on page 3. And CJN, Chief Justice of Nigeria, orders probe of Sokoto Sharia Court judge. That's on page 3 in greater detail. Now, at the foot of the front page, you have a window of 3 headlines. Shettima is governor of Borno. Northern presidential aspirant forged my voice. That's on page 35. The story is in greater detail on page 35. Student killed as gunmen invade Dino's protest venue. That's Senator Dino Melaye. Details of that story can be found on page 4. And investors oversubscribe UBA's $500 million Eurobond by 240%. Details of that story, page 13. Claire.
All right, let me just quickly take the different captions, of course, of the lead story. As Kingsley said, that, of course, the signing of the budget into law by acting president. Now, the New Telegraph just has a picture story of it. And you can see right there, those that witnessed the signing of the 2017 budget into law, including Senate President Bukola Saraki, as of course detailed by this paper. You also have the House of Representatives there. You have the Senior Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly matters is also there. You also have, of course, a Minister of Budget Planning and Chief of Staff to the President. That's how the New Telegraph captured that story. But again, it's also on the front page of the Nigerian Pilot, same picture story, of course, with the same pictures witnessing the signing of the law of the bill into law. But it comes with a caption under it that's the Pilot. At last, Oshibajo signs 7.4 trillion naira 2017 budget into law. The details of that story on Pilot, it's on page 5. But let me return you back to the New Telegraph. Other stories on the New Telegraph. Billionaire kidnappers dead. I sell pigs to survive. And it comes with a rider. Artisans Evans was our biggest customer. You can read up the details of that on page 8. Now, just trending stories a bit above that lead story. FG treating Arawa youths with kid gloves. Haneze, it's on page 33. And U.S. senators oppose sale of fighter jets to Nigeria. You can pick up that story on page 6. And again, let me bring you down to the bottom of the paper. Yoruba leaders shared money to cover Abiola's killers. And that's been attributed to Mustafa. But again, Opadokun says he's a pathological liar. You may want to pick up that details of that on page 2. But another interesting story just atop the nameplate, drama as EFCC invades the Sun's premises. Now, there are quite a number of other riders to that story. Newspaper sues FG. Why we visited the Sun by EFCC, and Faoshe Fanikade, editors, lawyers, CSOs condemn invasion. Bayo.
Yes, the 2017 budget is now an act of the National Assembly. Acting President Professor Yemi Osinbajo assented to the bill yesterday. The budget is tagged Budget of Economic Recovery and Growth, and it is intended to pull the nation out of recession. He explained the delay in assenting to the bill. He says there had to be consultations to reinstate all the allocations of important executive projects that were the legislature did not include. These, he cited, include Railway Standard Gauge, Mambila Power Project, Second Niger Bridge, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, among others. He said, however, these had been reduced, the funds for this had been reduced to accommodate some other projects. The good positive thing about this time around is that there is a jojo between the executive and the legislature, and a compromise was reached, and therefore those ones that were excluded can be accommodated at a later day within the broad development plan. However, at the signing ceremony were principal officers of the National Assembly, members of the Federal Executive Council, and principal aides of the presidency. And now the budget is 7.4 trillion. Revenue projection is 5.8 trillion, while deficit of 2.36 trillion expected to be sourced from loans from abroad. The Senate President made a remark and said the 2 trillion provided for as capital is the largest ever, and this will go a long way in changing the system of budgeting and giving critical prominence to capital projects. The concerns of the reflection in the budget areas of roads and railway, which will have about 200 billion. 500 billion is going for works and housing, 46 billion for special zonal projects. This is a deliberate attempt to shift the economy towards critical infrastructure so that the economy will have a strong infrastructure to rely upon. That is the budget 2017. The other sad story, which is the loss of about, some say 3 students, others say about 5 students. This was at a rally at the entrance of Kogi State Polytechnic. There was a pro-Senator Dino Melaye rally that was invaded by gunmen, and unfortunately, some casualties were recorded.
All right, well, let's return to the papers now. Let's take a look at the front page of the Punch news. Punch is next for us now. We can see that on the screen shortly. All right, Punch newspaper, of course, goes back to the 2016 appropriations. Budget padding. EFCC begins probe of Dogara and others, and to grill Jibrin. And I'll soon make revelations on 2017 budget, says ex-appropriation chairman. That's Jibrin. Details of the story can be found inside. Now, an earpiece there beside the nameplate of the Punch. Slain Hero Cop. That's, of course, an incident that took place in Owerri. Now, donors exceed $15,000 target in 24 hours. Then, of course, you have an accident scene there, unfortunately. Let's look at other headlines there. The signing of the budget, of the appropriation bill into law is also there. At last, Oshibajo signs 2017 budget, explains delay. And psychiatric test for traffic offenders begins July 1st. And one killed as Melaye supporters and police clash in Kogi. And EFCC operatives invade Sun newspaper. Let's go above the nameplate very quickly and then see the headline there. Sheikh Sani tackles Obasanjo over failure to honor MKO. Yesterday, by the way, was June 12th.
Indeed, yesterday was June 12th, Kingsley, and that's the lead story on the front page of the Nigerian Pilot. It says, why I annulled June 12th. And that's attributed to IBB. Details of that on page 2. Now, there's a writer says, Abiola's presidency would have been ousted via coup. That's the lead story of the Nigerian Pilot. Of course, just a little below the nameplate, to find Fauci lied on claims of a Paris club refund. That's according to the APC. Now, judges recall FG may rearrest judicial officers. Now, NJC, federal government has no case against Justice Ademola. Details of that you can find on page 2. Trending stories just at the bottom of the paper. Mayhem in Kogi as gunmen attack Melaye. There's a writer to that. Senator plotting to disturb the peace, and that's attributed to Governor Bello. Now, Merchant Navy seeks FG support for enhanced operations. It's also trending. Now, recession, Kwara housewives abandon kerosene for charcoal. And DSS nabs 51 kidnappers nationwide. Right.
Well, the story about the Sun, the Nigerian Guild Editors has asked the Economic and Financial Crime Commission to apologize to the Sun newspaper publishing limited for what the NGE president, Funke Gomode, described as unwarranted siege of the premises of the company and subjecting workers to crude intimidation, psychological and emotional trauma. However, the FCC says the visit to the Sun head office was part of his routine to ascertain the assets of a publishing company which is a subject of a sustaining interim forfeiture order. And therefore, they deny that the claim by staff of the publishing company that is because they carry pro-Biafra, pro-Boko Haram and Niger Delta militant stories that they were invaded. The Guild of Editors questions why EFCC is acting on a 10-year forfeiture order, which is the subject of a court hearing. The other human interest story is the father of the alleged kidnapper, Evans, that was arrested in Lagos. The father is surprised that his son is reported to be so stupendously rich. The father lives from hand to mouth by raising pigs. And he says the son's dilemma and tribulation is a product of a failed marriage. Apparently, the parents have not been living together. He says his son apparently is a good man. He, along the line, must have deviated to kidnapping and drug.
And the wife also claims to be ignorant of the husband's profession.
This interesting story.
Well,
24.
But yesterday in the papers, the alleged kidnapper Evans, also Elias Evans, said his mother knew that he was into crime. He said this. He said so.
And that's part of what the father was saying, that the boy has been seriously influenced by the mother, and that is a consequence of what we have.
Those are issues that will sort out at the parental level.
I was trying to draw attention to this issue. 24 Boko Haram suspects who have been disguising as headsmen have been arrested in Edo. The Otaru of Auchi, Alhaji Hali Rumomo, revealed this, and he was thanking the commander for being bold to arrest them. Those arrested have been taken to Benin City.
All right, Baya Tuebe, thank you very much. We've had a number of security incidents, particularly on the highway, by persons posing as headsmen. Thanks a lot, Baya. I'll see you tomorrow for another session of
Thank you too.
Super Review. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with our principal item for discussion, the power of appropriation. And
The Future Assured project of the wife of the president Aisha Muhammad Buhari is carrying out free medical screening and distribution of food items at various IDP camps while ensuring the economic empowerment of women through training and skill acquisition. In recognition of her efforts, wives of governors have lent their voices and support.
In Kogi State, we feel the impact of Future Assured, especially in women and children.
The Future Assured program of Mrs. Aisha Muhammad Buhari, the wife of the president, has been very assuring and still reassuring in Sokoto State. It has impacted positively in the areas of humanity, especially women and children.
Supports the Future Assured initiative. Email programs@futureassured.org.ng. Future Assured, promoting and protecting the lives of Nigerian women and children.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria reaching you live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. Yesterday, the acting president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, signed into law the appropriation bill for 2017. Of course, this is June already, and the financial year is due to end in December 2017. What has happened over the years is there's always been the recurrent altercation between the executive branch and the legislative branch of government over the proper exercise of the power of appropriation, which has sometimes resulted in delays and also with deleterious consequences for the economy. In this background report, as a prompt for our conversation this morning, our correspondent Oyemi Ajayi tells us more about the frequent controversy over the power of appropriation.
An appropriation law is a statute in which the specific and primary function is to authorize the release of public funds from the Treasury. In Nigeria, Section 80 of the 1999 Constitution grants the National Assembly the power to approve appropriated public funds. Going further, Section 83 also provides that no money shall be withdrawn from any public fund of the Federation other than the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation, unless the issue of these monies has been authorized by an act of the National Assembly. Since the return to civil rule, there has been an unending dispute over the legislature's insistence that it has the power to vary budget estimates presented to it by the executive for approval. This has made the Nigerian budget suffer setback at different stages of passage right from 1999. Former President Umaru Yar'Adua had his share when there was the serial haphazard implementation of the Appropriation Act, leading to the selective implementation of the budget by the executive. One that Nigerians will not forget in a hurry was in 2016, when the phrase budget pardon was included in Nigeria's political lexicon. The executive had accused the legislature of adjusting the budget and introducing estimates that were not part of what was submitted to it. Also, that same year, the budget was said to have been declared missing. This year is not an exception, as there was a delay in the passage of the 2017 Nigerian budget. Just as the adage goes, when two elephants fight, the grass suffers. This has been the case in Nigeria, as the continued altercation between the legislature and the executive is having its toll on the common citizens and the economy now in recession. As it is now, The executive is asking the Supreme Court to determine the extent of power of the legislature to appropriate public funds and also whether the National Assembly has the latitude to revise estimates proposed by the executive arm of government or not.
Oyemi Ajayi, thank you. We're now being joined by a former Speaker, House of Representatives, Honorable Umar Ali Naaba. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
We also have here with us the Chairman, Senate Committee on Information and Media, Senator Aliyu Sa'abi Abdullahi. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, and then, of course, we have with us in the studios here a professor of law, a former governor of Edo State, and two-time senator, Senator Userime Osumbo. Professor Osumbo, a pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning.
Good morning.
All right, gentlemen, let's begin the conversation. We'll be joined subsequently, by the way, by a legal practitioner, of course, a familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria. That's Kayode Ajulo. You're all lawmakers, whether current or past. You know, you continue, of course, to retain your experience as well as knowledge of the inner workings, together, of course, with the clashes that you had during your time with the executive branch. But let's begin with the former speaker. You had quite some running battles with the President Obasanjo while he was in charge of the executive branch at the federal level. But why do we have these recurrent clashes between the executive and the legislature over the proper exercise of the power of appropriation, otherwise clearly stipulated by the Constitution?
I think this has to do with a number of issues. One, definitely there is the issue of ego. Ego is involved. The Constitution has clearly indicated that any money that is going to be spent by the executive on behalf of the whole nation for the purposes of development must be approved by the National Assembly. It must be spent in the manner prescribed by the National Assembly. These are the wordings of the Constitution. And there is a reason that the Constitution or the system of separation of powers has given latitude to the legislature to look at the budget, or for the executive to bring the budget to the legislature, for the legislature to be able to approve the budget. Therefore, you don't bring a document to the legislature and the legislature just stamps it and take it back to you. I think this is abnormal. Therefore, the legislature has to look at the document and ensure that whatever is to be done, is done rightly and correctly. And in that process, the grounds of the executive is normally that the legislature has increased the budgetary provisions. And budgetary provisions are just estimates. Even the Constitution indicating that whatever the executive has brought to the legislature are mere estimates. But my first experience with the budget when it was brought to us in September 1999 was that the executive brought the proposals even in the form of a bill. A bill is only prepared by the majority leader of either the House or the Senate. The executive should not bring estimates in the form of a bill, because when you prepare a bill, it is a legal document. And the estimates are not final until passed by the National Assembly. Therefore, it is the majority leader in the Senate or in the House of Representatives that is supposed to prepare a bill. But that is presupposing that the majority leader would have been briefed by the executive arm, because the supposition is that the executive and the legislature work together because they are members of the same party. But when we came in 1999, that synergy, that party spirit was broken by the president himself, because the synergy that was supposed to exist between the party, the executive, and the legislature, which used to happen back in 1979 when we had a democratically elected government, became elusive. And this principally occurred because the president did not, I think the president, and I believe this to be true, that the president we had mistook civilian rule for democracy. And that has been the bane of all our budgetary matters from 1999 to today. Successive presidents, particularly those from the military, mistake civilian rule for democracy. They don't accept the fact of democracy. They don't accept the fact of working together with institutions in order to fashion out governance. So these are some of the problems that are bedeviling the budgetary process in this country.
Okay, let's bring in Senator, former executive governor of Edo State, and of course a two-time Senator Sumbo. You have been, an executive, at the state level, and you've also had the experience of the legislature 2 times and all that. Share with us briefly with regards to this, the question in hand. What is your experience, and do you agree with, the former speaker?
Well, let me, thank you, answer this question or put it in a different context by asking maybe 2 or 3 rhetorical questions. The first is, who has the power of appropriation under the Nigerian Constitution? The clear answer is that it's the National Assembly. The background information we got said that it is for the National Assembly to approve appropriation. That is not correct. It is for the National Assembly to appropriate public funds for spending for the development of the country. So that's the first one. What role does the president have to exercise? That's the second rhetorical question. What is the role of the executive represented by the president in all this? Section 81 of the Constitution gives the president power to submit estimates, lay those estimates before both houses of the National Assembly, and it is for the National Assembly to consider those estimates and pass the appropriation bill. The third rhetorical question is, can the National Assembly vary the figures while in the process of passing the bill? My answer to that question is yes. They have the power to vary the figures, either to increase or to reduce. To deny that the National Assembly has power to vary would mean that the National Assembly is a rubber stamp and is bound willy-nilly to approve the estimates submitted by the president. So clearly the power of appropriation lies within the legislature, whether at the federal level or even at the state level or even local government level for that matter. But there is a problem arising from another kind of perception, which is that who has the power to manage the economy? Again, the answer is that it's the president that has the responsibility to manage the economy. And that is really the basis of the clash. Because in submitting the estimates, the executive believes that they are responsible to the nation for managing the economy. And therefore, if the National Assembly tinkers with the figures, then it will throw its own projections for the management of economy into jeopardy. So the problem confronting us as a nation is, how do you balance these two contending forces and issues? Both well meant. both sides mean well for the nation. It is important for me to mention that the public needs to have the correct perspective to this, because very often the National Assembly, the legislature, gets the short end of the stick, because people feel, oh, they are just wasting the time of the president or the executive and retarding national development. But it's mistaken. The legislature is there to act as checks and balances on the executive, as far as this issue is concerned. Because the person going to spend the money ought not to be the person to decide how much to spend. The executive is the arm that spends the money in executing the projects. The executive, therefore, ought not also to be the person to decide this is how much I want to spend and this is how I want to spend it. That is why democracies, for centuries now, have given power to the representatives of the people, the direct representatives of the people, to decide what has to be spent and where it has to be spent, because they are answerable to their various constituents. I am happy that this matter, at long last, is going to be arbitrated or adjudicated upon by the Supreme Court in order to resolve this lingering dispute. But I do hope that the constitutional provisions have to be respected. And the Supreme Court, I believe, will respect the constitutional provisions, but somehow explain how these two relationships can be managed in order that the country does not suffer for it.
All right, Senator Usumba, thank you very much. You raised a number of points, of course, along with Right Honorable Gali Naba, former Speaker of the House of Reps. Let's now get the thoughts of the current chair of the Senate Committee on Information and Media, Senator Sabi Abdullahi. What are your thoughts in terms of the recurrent altercation between the executive and the legislature, the yin and yang over?
Well, thank you very much. First, let me say whatever I want to say here will be building on what the last two speakers have said. First, they've been in the National Assembly, the former governor being the ranking senator, and this is the presiding officer. They've seen it all at the most critical stage through which the country was passing through what I would call a learning process, the learning period. Because, of course, this is the very first time that this arm of government, the legislature itself, was having an unbroken years of continuous existence. And so the institutional memory to an extent is still embryonic. And so many people tend to that is to kind of distort the facts as they are. Now, I think there is one other provision of the Constitution that we need to bring into this discourse. That is section 56 or so, where it talks about the powers of exercising that is how the National Assembly should exercise the powers of appropriation, where we talk about the money bill. I think 59, section 59. Now, if you go back again to section 58, it actually gives a general provision of how the National Assembly should exercise its powers. Now, if you look at the provisions here, it stated clearly what will happen if, for example, the president does not assent to what the National Assembly passes, which means at the end of the day, it will be brought back to the National Assembly, and by 2/3 majority, they will definitely pass the budget, and the assent of the president is not required. Now, when you look at this provision, it clearly shows that the framers of our Constitution clearly placed the powers to appropriate on the doorstep of the National Assembly. Now, if we have to accept this fact, then we should understand that we are playing democracy in a constitutional regime. And within this context, participation is necessary, engagement is necessary, discourse is necessary. Now, I think the earlier submission by the former speaker says it all. Those who do not believe that they need to share power and responsibility, I think have brought some of these things very clearly to bear. And I think that is what Nigerians must come to respect. Okay, so that at the end of the day, let it be known that as representative of the people, why are we in the National Assembly?
Okay, gentlemen, I really do not think that there is any controversy as to whether or not the power of appropriation, you understand, lies with the legislature. I also think that the presidency also is aware of that. But the issue is to what extent, and I'm going to ask this question. Now, is the budget a final outcome of a process that, presupposes collaboration between the different arms? The National Assembly, the presidency, the NDAs. Is it an outcome? Is it a final outcome that should, be approved as it is by the legislature?
Well, I think here we need to understand one thing. First, in looking at the responsibilities of the various arms, these specific provisions are not enough. Because, for example, if you look at Section 4, which talks about the directive principles of state policy, it's provided that in carrying out our functions, we must act in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution.
You know why I ask this?
I understand.
Yes, because it is expected that at the different stages, right from the MTEF, that the National Assembly, of course, is part of the process.
Yeah.
You ratify what is brought within the medium-term expenditure framework. Now, the medium-term expenditure framework is supposed to be the basis for, the presentation of the budget.
Yeah.
So why does the legislature need again to augment, reduce, increase what has passed through a process that you are involved in?
Now, the MTF, the strategy paper, does not state the clear details of what is brought in as estimate. It only gives you a projection and gives also the assumptions. Now, when it comes to preparing the final budget, remember, whatever is laid before the executive, the National Assembly, is what the various MDAs now come before the various committees to discuss. It's at that stage that you understand what the components of the budget are. Now, what I'm trying to say earlier is that in looking at the other provisions of the Constitution, that the primary purpose of government is the welfare and security of the people. The other section that talks about economic policy is also saying, in managing the economy, you have to make sure that you carry every constituent part. Now, as representative of the people, you come to understand that the National Assembly, every single member of the National Assembly will be interested in saying that no constituent part is left out. And I think this is where the issues are. Yeah. Now, I'm coming to one point. I remember during the Obasanjo period, I was in service, and the medium-term expenditure, the medium-term sector strategy planning was introduced. During this period, I recall vividly, all the various MDAs, when they are meeting, the various committees from the National Assembly, House of Reps, Senate, they are brought in during the planning stage. And I think when that started happening, there were less altercations because the National Assembly is now having an insight into what exactly the executive intends to bring as directions for either economic development or for the overall welfare of the state. Now, in the case we are having right now, most instances it is when the budget is laid that the legislature gets to understand what exactly is even inside. So I think we need to understand that everybody has a responsibility. I'm representing a constituency, and it is unfair on those who send me to the National Assembly if at the end of the day, like the former speaker was saying, a document just is brought to us and I just stamp it and say take it and go back. Then by the time implementation starts, I now realize that my own constituent part has even nothing to show for economic development.
All right.
So I think these are the key issues we need to also look at.
Okay. Distinguished Senator Aliu Sabi Abdullahi, thank you very much. Again, we'll come back to you in the course of the conversation. Let's return to the former Speaker of the House of Reps. One of the points that Professor Osumbo made, Senator Osumbo as well, made is to the effect that, look, the tension that we are having which manifests now in the frequent altercations between the legislature and executive is the necessity to allow the president manage the economy, because that's his overarching responsibility, together with the yearly challenge of appropriating funds to ensure that there's proper management of the economy. What is your response to this, bearing in mind that there is a sense in which also the National Assembly also oversights the economy through its interactions with various MDAs, whether not the executive or otherwise?
Well, my own response to this quagmire is simply that any president who is elected on the platform of a political party is supposed to be under the direction of that political party. And I believe that all our political parties have manifestos, and before getting elected, they must have made promises to the people as to what they are going to do. And I believe that before anything, at the stage of preparing a budget for the nation, before anything, whoever the president is must invite the party and sit with the party and ask the party, we are now in government. What did we promise the people? And what are in our manifesto that people had seen and elected us? This is very, very important. Then the legislature, represented by the presiding officers, must be invited. So now you have the executive, you have the legislature, and you have the party under the umbrella of the party. Allow these three institutions to discuss the budget and agree on the principles that must underline the budget. Once that is done and agreed, I'm sure all of these occurrences, unpleasant, would not have been happening. Because whether we like it or not, a president is not elected, he is not elected by himself. People elect the party. And in the outlet analysis, it's the party that is going to defend the president and the government as a whole. Therefore, the key here is the involvement of our political parties in our budgetary process. We must carry our parties along. I believe that once that is wherever any explanation is supposed to be given to any people or persons or constituencies or zones, the party can manage that. Because as you said, the president is responsible for managing the economy. And that is true. And the president must therefore have a clear perspective. And to have that clear perspective, before doing anything, any party that is supposed to bring about problems to him must be carried along in whatever is going to be done. This issue of carrying along is what we are having to contend with today. What is happening today is that, for example, I am witness to this, I've been party to this. You know, even with the tensions between 1999 to 2003, when I was Speaker of the National Assembly, even with those tensions, we had a situation whereby every week, every Monday, we used to have a caucus meeting in the villa. And those caucus meetings helped greatly in minimizing the tension arising out of the relationship between the executive and the legislature. Every Monday, at least up to 2001, these caucus meetings were taking place until Senator Yamade was removed as the chairman of the party. That was the end of any caucus meeting. And today, I think the last caucus meeting we have of our party, the ruling party, the APC, in the villa was in February 2016. This is 1 year, 4 months today. We have never had any caucus meeting. And therefore, I believe that there must be a situation where the party and the president and leaders of the National Assembly sit down and discuss all of these matters before initiating anything. Agree on some principles, you know. I know that since the inception of this administration, there has never been a point where the president, the speaker, the Senate president, and the party chairman sat together in a room and decide the budget or any other thing. This must be corrected.
Okay, let me bring in Professor Osumbo, because the issue of meeting and being carried along, you listen to Senator Abdullahi Saab, he says like they have not been carried along. What they get to see is the estimates, and if by the Fiscal Responsibility Act says, look, the National Assembly ought to be part of the process, right from the medium-term expenditure framework. All the estimates and whatever distributions of the budget, they should be aware. And if they are not aware, what does that tell us about the National Assembly and the executive relationship?
Well, I agree with you entirely that there should be collaboration, there should be consultation. And the critical stakeholders, parties in this enterprise have to put heads together and work in one accord. The issue of appropriation, to bring it down to the barest level, is about allocation of scarce resources. The bottom line is the money that is available, how is it going to be spent? So it's not entirely a legal question. You know, earlier on we were looking at what does Section 80, Section 81, Section 59 say. But at the end of the day, this is a political question. And politics, as they said, involves, it's about who gets what, when, and where. And in order to arrive at an amicable position, acceptable to all parties, there have to be consultations through the entire process. So I agree that we need to look at this, carry everybody along. Everybody who is elected, every member of the National Assembly expects to be able to go back to his constituency and say, this is what is there for you. And it's not enough to have people in the budget office just concluding this exercise and bringing it to the National Assembly and expecting them to pass it. So once this process of consultation, from the word go, from the very beginning, what we are finding now in recent years is that the consultation is almost at the tail end of the whole process. After the budget has already been, the appropriation has been completed, it is then that the executive people sit together to see how do we manage this. You have passed this was not in the original submission. How do we resolve these issues? The process, that should be corrected if consultation takes place right from the very beginning of the process.
Well, the distinguished senator and the gentleman, that's a point that I would like us, to thrash out. Again, let me begin with Professor Osumbo. You say we at the budget, we're talking about the legal, constitutional questions around it. That more now, it looks like it's actually managing the politics of it. But some persons argue that it's actually managing the political economy. And there's been the frequent reference to National Assembly members representing various constituencies, and they have to report back. There's one clear issue that some persons have often raised with regard to the budgetary process. Take works, for instance, take roads, for instance. Lawmakers want to be able to go back to say, oh yes, we have appropriated money for the construction of your road. The executive is seeking to manage the economy and say, all right, we want to focus on major arterial roads. And having the atomistic budgets allocations year in, year out will not conduce to the due completion of those arterial roads that can then act as major catalysts for driving the economy. But the lawmakers would appear to be more interested. Of course, that's one of the reasons why they were elected. They said, look, I want to bring this to my constituency rather than taking a holistic view of the economy. Professor Osumba, let's begin with you and then take the views of the others.
Yes, this is a very cogent point, very topical, and it's been with us for a very long time. In fact, in the past, you find that the executive says they are unable to implement the budget. Take, for instance, the road, the example you gave. Before you construct it, there has to be design. You have to appoint consultants. So if consultants have not been appointed, the design for the roads have not been done, and the member of the National Assembly just puts some money in the budget for construction of that road will not be constructed. That money will just be tied down because the basic requirements, the prerequisites have not been satisfied, have not been met. But again, this can be resolved and cured through the process of consultation and also through the process of institutional memory. We've said it before that the rate of turnover in the National Assembly is just too much, too frequent. If there's institutional memory, then those who are there now, we understand that it's not just enough when the appropriation bill is before you in the National Assembly to say, my road in my area, put 2 billion. It's not enough. You have to make provision for the design, for consultancy, different stages. So this has been a problem, and it can only be cured through consultation, through institutional memory, and carrying everybody along.
Just as you respond to Kingsley's question, Senator Sa'abi, I don't know the number of projects that you introduced, that the National Assembly introduced. We understand there are over about 4,000 of them, amounting to, the over 400 billion naira, of course, on the budget. Now, one of those projects that the National Assembly cut down was the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, which is to be completed by December, they said. Did the National Assembly consider the import of your legislative inputs into the budget, 2017 budget, on the economic and recovery plan of the presidency?
Well, thank you very much. I think, my distinguished colleague said, this issue will remain contentious because in the first instance, if you look at the Constitution, like I said, from my own perspective, the Constitution is saying in carrying out our function, you must ensure that there is balance across the entire federation. You must not act in a manner as to make some people lack the asset for their own economic growth and prosperity while empowering some other people. Now, what I have seen is that year in, year out, there are some roads that have remained the permanent feature of proposals in the estimate that comes from the executive. You don't see a proposal that tells you, okay, this year, this road to this road, we are going to go into the design. This road to this road, we are going to do this. There is nothing. All you just keep seeing is one road being repeated year on year on. And even with the repetition, at the end of the day, nothing happens. I will give you an insight. I'm representing Niger North Senatorial District. As I speak to you now, there is a bridge that collapsed between Makwa and Makera. This was reported last week in the Senate. Now, that has now crippled all movements to the south, northwest, particularly Kebbi, Sokoto, Zamfara. It has crippled, and even some people going to Kaduna. What has happened right now as I'm speaking to you is that everybody going to Kaduna now will now from Makwa come to Bida, from Bida come to Mina, Suleja, and then proceed back. That road has cut. What has happened is since 2010, it was approved by the Federal Executive Council sometimes in March 2010. And I will tell you, Makera, Kontagora, Yawuri Road, and the one that goes to Sokoto has been on the drawing board for so many years. Even when funds are appropriated, nothing happens to it.
So what happens to these other projects? They remain ongoing?
The question I'm trying to say here is this. You see, in discussing and trying to understand these perspectives, it is important that, yes, you look at the arterial roads that everybody is going to benefit from. But in doing that also, the Constitution does not also say in doing that you should emasculate the other segments that require some little intervention. Today, as I speak to you, What is the level of federal intervention in rural development? It's almost nothing to write home about. And most of the, for example, during the days of DFRI, you come to recall that there were some intervention in agricultural areas where some feeder roads are being repaired. Today, what we are having is that all of these things have collapsed.
Yeah, during the time of DFRI, you didn't have a National Assembly.
Yeah, I know, but then it's an example we must also put at the back of our mind, because ideally, whatever happened, government is a continuum. And when we came into democracy, ideally, we should have even done much better. So the point I'm trying to make here is that a situation where year in, year out, you see yourself being marginalized, and that segment of people you are representing feel marginalized, you cannot come to the National Assembly and be a rubber stamp. You definitely want to get assurances that yes, these rules should also get attention. If there is a systematic plan where, for example, the Lagos-Ibadan expressway is being repaired based on a systematic process, and I know at the end of the day, after year 3, year 4 in the plan, it will get maybe to Makwa, Tegina, and all those areas, I'll have comfort. But where such does not happen, this is almost 2 years now. If you go into the budget, you will see most of these roads that we have been talking about, not even one single thing has been done in those roads, and they were actually appropriated. So I think this is where the controversy comes in. And we must understand that, yes, you must prioritize. But in prioritizing, you need not kill the small guys.
Well, Right Honorable Galina, but what's your take on this? How do you resolve the contention between, seeking to propel the economy and then not neglecting, as Senator Sabi says, remote locations where they have their constituents who voted for them?
Well, let me first of all go back to my earlier point on bringing about harmony, in the budget process. You'll agree with me, that is, if you really understand what used to happen, or what happened between 1979 and 83 over the budget. Throughout the 4 years of that democratic experiment, particularly with respect to the federal government, we had never had issues, budgetary issues, between the executive and the legislature. And that was simply because the fact of democracy was accepted by the head of the executive arm, the party, and the legislative arms. And I believe that once there is consultation, there is consideration and cooperation, we'll have a smooth sail over any budgetary discussion, over any budgetary debate. And you'll agree with me that the ruling party, the National Party of Nigeria, had a manifesto. And they had housing and agriculture as their priority. And these sectors were prioritized in the first budget of the federal government in 1979. And today, every nook and cranny you enter in this country, you'll see those houses. And I'm witness to the fact that a lot of money was spent on agriculture. And these were two things that every member of the party in the National Assembly, then both in the Senate and the House of Representatives, ascribed to. So there was no issue. So what should have been happening, like I said earlier, is a situation whereby you have the president, you have the party, you have heads of the legislature, the Senate and the House of Representatives. You discuss the budget. The heads of the legislature go back and consult their colleagues. The budget is going to be designed. What are your suggestions? Every member of the National Assembly will put in something. It is out of what they put in that the heads of the institutions will now go and discuss with the party and the president and come up with something, so that by the time you come up with something agreeable to everybody, is in place. And the moment the budget is brought to the National Assembly, everybody would see that it's not a new document to them. You know, you have taken their suggestions, and the party has chosen certain projects and promised that, look, the other projects, let's leave them until the next budget. So there is consensus. So what is the fuss?
Okay.
But because of their failure to do this, we're having all these problems.
Okay. Let's quickly take a question to Governor, Senator Osumbo. You know, we've been talking about rubber stamp. The National Assembly doesn't want to be rubber stamp to the executive and all that. But in other climes, there is explicit provision for what the legislature can or cannot do with respect to, you know, the budget. Now, is there an explicit provision in our Constitution that the National Assembly can either increase, reduce, you know, budget estimates laid before it by the presidency? Or is it just acting on, you know, the fact that it doesn't want to be rubber stamped? Or do we need an amendment to effect that?
Well, let me make, in answering your question, a general point. One general point is that people, Nigerians, expect everything to be spelled out in the Constitution. And it is not possible to spell out every detail in the Constitution. If you look at the American Constitution, it's very slim, very small compared to the size of the Nigerian Constitution. But in Nigeria, we want to spell out every detail. In answering your question, I would say that the Constitution has made it abundantly clear, and we said this before, that it is for the National Assembly to appropriate. The President submits only the estimates. So the power to appropriate includes power to increase or decrease. And in my view, it is not necessary to spell that out in black and white, because the power to appropriate takes into cognizance the power to increase or reduce. It is implied. But sorry, let me just quickly make 2 points. The Right Honorable Galinaba has made this point consistently, which we need to emphasize, that, and I made this point before, that we shouldn't just restrict ourselves to what the Constitution has said, recognizing only the President and the National Assembly. The Constitution doesn't talk about the role of the party, but as he has consistently mentioned, the party has a very important role to play in a party-based democracy, as we are practicing in Nigeria. Let's not pretend that the political parties have no role. The ruling political party has no role to play. That would be a mistake, and that is what has been getting us into this problem. And lastly,
Senator, yes,
is that some of the problems we are having with respect to the federal budget of members of the National Assembly putting in projects into the budget is actually a reflection of the failure at the state level. Because here we are concentrating at what is happening at the federal level. If the states are carrying out their responsibilities as they should, then a federal legislature has no business putting into the as constituency project building of classrooms in his constituency.
Professor Sumbo, I'm afraid we have to stop here.
I was just going to say, Claire, just before you sign him off, finally, that's the point. We have not touched on this, but it's already brought it in. Now, very quickly, because one of the critical points you made is, look, executive submit, legislature appropriate, and that appropriation is coterminous with allocation, whereby you can either vary by increase or decrease. What lessons can State House of Assembly learn from this? We hardly ever hear of altercation, between the executive and legislature. It appears to be just what you call in editing parade go, you
rubber stamp. Yes. The rubber stamp.
Very quickly.
Well, I think that the nature of the organization of politics and operation at the state level is not as strong as it is at the federal level. And what you find is that the legislature, in most cases, is at the beck and call of the executives, because the executive dispenses patronage.
Professor Osayeme Osumbo, a former governor of Edo State and, of course, two-time Senator of the Federal Republic, we'd like to thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
We'll take a short break now. When we come back, of course, we'll be continuing our discussion.
Admission forms for the 2017-2018 academic session of NTA Television College JAWS into its diploma programs are now on sale. The diploma programs are in film and TV production, broadcast journalism, and TV engineering technology. Applicants are required to have at least 5 credits, including English language and mathematics at SSC, NECO, or GCO levels in not more than 1 sitting. Application forms can be obtained from the TV College Refi JAWS or at any NTA zonal centers nationwide on payment of a no-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA Television College. Completed application forms should be returned to the Office of the Academic Secretary, NTA Television College, or the Center of Purchase on or before 28th of July 2017. For further inquiries, please call 0806 980 9807 or 0703 660 7155. NTA Television College, training you to be the best you can be.
Already have come by way of truth. Let's get your take on some of the issues. Of course, you've listened to the comments, by the other guests just before you came in. The frequent altercation between the executive and the legislature, over the proper exercise of the power of appropriation is, of course, one that we are taking a look at today. What are your thoughts on this, based on what some of the guests have also said, together, of course, with any other issues you may wish to raise?
Well, thank you very much. For some time, I remember the issue of this altercation seemed to rear its ugly head during the tenure of Obasanjo. That should be like 2002, and it should be expected in the sense that these are politicians, expected in the sense that this is about politics, this is about interest. And again, when we talk of power, it is expected that there will be some power play, particularly who to dispense was and not. And here we are talking of issue of appropriation, we are talking of issue of money, and which is like the El Dorado in whatsoever policy you may think. But the truth has to be told, all this issue, it's just unfortunate that we always seem to place politics over policy and law. Our law is so clear when it comes to that. And I really appreciate what the former Speaker of the Federation mentioned when he talks about the separation of power, and when he talked about check and balances, and when the distinguished senator talked about one of the reasons why they need to do about this appropriation is about arbitrariness of those to implement it. But as it is, what we are complaining about, if care is not taken, is the same issue of arbitrariness that you see the assemblymen doing when it comes to where the law, that's particularly the grand norm of our law, that's the Constitution, gives them the power the power of appropriation. And the law is so clear. That section, that's chapter 5 from subsection 80, 81, 82, 83, really clear this thing. And it is written blue and black. And that's why you see the American case of Marbury talked about what is law that is written down. It's for us not to disobey it. It's for us to follow it. It's quite so clear about who to prepare it, and when you after preparing it, you place it tender before the assemblyman to look at it, to approve it. And
is it just to approve, or does it also imply, because that's what Professor Sumbo said, that it's implied that they can also adjust?
Thank you very much. I listened to Professor Sumbo, and actually Professor Sumbo is a laws and legal scholar, and which most of his opinion will not be faulted. But here I'm seeing some things which I think we need to correct. Particularly, even very close to him in Bender State in 1982, the Supreme Court, in the case of Bender State and Federation, that's Attorney General Federation, really defined the roles of the executive, the judiciary, and legislature, in the sense that everybody has their own roles to play when it comes to appropriation. Particularly, when it comes to the Constitution talked about you prepare. When it comes to prepare, it's not something that you sit today to do. That's where you find out that the executive, they have departments, they have MGAs. They sit down, they are close to the people, and to know what to do, particularly in implementing. That is one. And again, when you look at it very well, then theirs is to approve. It is like today the president may appoint anybody to be after the appointment, you still need to take the name of such appointment to I have responsibility. My constituents are looking at me. I need to at least to promote their interest. I need to draw some development to the area. Fine, but our law made by them has already made it clear that in doing that, this is the normal ways of doing it. By whatever the input you wanted to have, to give it to the minister, and that will be incorporated.
No, but I think that, Mr. Ajulo, the naughty issue has to do with what is inherent in the powers of appropriation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Professor Osmond, before he left, indicated that would be coterminous with allocation.
Yeah.
Right? Now, they are saying, are they expected merely to be a rubber stamp? Because they can't touch anything in the bill as brought by the executive with the estimates, or in seeking to allocate, they will say, oh yeah, it's fine, you have an overarching command or control of the economy, but we think that this should come here on account of the following considerations.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much. You know, one thing is this, let us try to look at the fundamentals of this issue itself. You know, one thing we have to distinguish is, first, we always have laws. That's normal laws that the assembly always originates from them to present it. But when it comes to appropriation, like when it comes to budget, it is the executive. It is the prerogative of the executive to present it. And now, I'm sure where the problem is this: nobody will say, of course, the assembly would maybe they lack the power to tinker with it. But it's the way. It should not be done crudely. Because I remember when the chairman was talking about arbitrariness and co. We are not saying that you should not do that, but I think we should follow the law. It's better, but not to do it under the whims and caprice of the assembly to just change and to cancel and to change some things. It is more like we are preparing. The Constitution never gives any assembly member power to prepare the Constitution, to change even there. You see some subhead. All they need to do is like we have a foundation. It is the duty of the executive to prepare the foundation. You can't say because we are building the house, because you now want to approve it, you quickly ask the bricklayer to destroy and to demolish the foundation and start erecting another one. No, that is not
you talked about the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and again it states in part, that's the section 12, that the expenditure framework, and Senator Sabi, so late, shall be considered for approval. That's at that level, with such clarifications or what inputs, if any, as the National Assembly, finds appropriate, and all that.
And
so,
yes, give the minister the power and to take.
So at that level, the National Assembly has the power, to make inputs.
Well, I think you see, I'm not a lawyer, but one thing with lawyers is they try to bring in so many technicalities. Let's look at these things from a very rational and common sense point of view, for which many Nigerians will understand. These things are very clear. He talked about the ground norm. You cannot, you see, in understanding how to operate, you can't take one law without making reference to other provisions. That's why it's a constitution. Now, the powers to legislate, the powers for executive and judiciary clearly were stated. But there is directive principles of state policy. And permit me, I'm not a lawyer, so I have not crammed these sections. But let me, for purpose of understanding.
That's your
Yes, but let's look at it. It says that I think page 2?
Let's go to chapter 2. Chapter 2 of the Constitution.
Yes, chapter 2. Okay, this is it. It says section 13. It shall be the duty and responsibility of all organs of government and of all authorities and persons exercising legislative, executive, or judicial powers to conform to, observe, and apply the provisions of this chapter of this Constitution. Now, 14, it says the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. Then the next one, section 3, says the composition of the government of the Federation or any of its agencies and the conduct of its affairs. Conduct of its affairs. That is the key word there. Shall be carried out in such manner as to reflect the federal character of Nigeria and the need to promote national unity and also to command national loyalty, thereby ensuring that there shall be no preponderance of persons from a few states or from a few ethnic or other sections groups in that government.
Senator,
now, excuse me, let's get this very clear.
Yeah, I just want to interject so that, just hold on a second, because you talked about this earlier before Mr. Kade Ajulo came in. You talked about the directive principles of state policy, right? Now, there's also a provision in the Constitution that relates to the proper management of the economy for the benefit of Nigerians. And we've also agreed that, look, the issue of appropriation is one that relates to the management of the political economy. There's a point that you raised earlier to say in buttress of what you thought is the power, or what you think rather is the power of appropriation, that in the event that the bill is passed, appropriation bill is passed by the Assembly, and the President declines or refuses or neglects to give his assent, there is a power of override. It comes back to the Assembly, and the Assembly can then veto, can then override the veto of the President or otherwise. That's the question I want to ask of the former Speaker. Let us assume the Assembly has tinkered with the appropriation bill, brought in whatever it wants to bring, it has varied it. And the President or the Governor says, look, I will not give my assent to this. And the National Assembly or the State Assembly decides to then override the veto. So it becomes a law at the state level or an act of the National Assembly. But there's an issue here. How then can you compel full implementation of that law when the executive, who ordinarily is in charge of the resources, is hamstrung by what you have passed if it disagrees fundamentally with the provisions in the bill which then became an act? Right, Honorable Nava.
Well, I will not accept that the President is hamstrung by the action of the National Assembly or by the action of the legislature, because the Constitution has conferred on the legislature the authority to override a president's veto. And that is a legal provision which the President, as the chief executive, whether he likes it or not, he must follow the law. Refusing to act is an impeachable offense because he must comply with the law. That is why there is a law, so that whatever we do is not our heart's desire. I remember in 1990, in 2000, when we passed the NDDC Act, and President Obasanjo didn't like it. He refused to assent to it. And we organized and override his veto in the House of Representatives, and also urged the Senate to do the same, which they did. And therefore, his assent was not needed. But the President did not say he was not going to implement the law. He did. And even though it was selective, but he was doing it. Eventually, of course, over other matters, we had to threaten to impeach him. So I think what is important for us in this country, as far as these issues are concerned, is not to go too legalistic. Because if the institutions insist on applying the full force of their powers, something might happen. And I always kept saying that, look, all of these issues are political issues. They are not beyond us. We must treat we must go about managing our country in a way that is functional.
That's right.
And if that has been the case from 1999 with our presidents, I'm sure all of these issues wouldn't have arisen. So I believe that, like the lawyer was saying, about appropriation, he is one of those lawyers who doesn't believe that the National Assembly has the power to tinker with the appropriation, the estimates brought by the president. But a lot of other people believe that, that is fait accompli. I subscribe to the fact that Appropriation Act or law is like any other law. I can add, I can subtract, I can do anything with it. I can do anything I want to do with it. But I believe that if I go that way, I'm not helping the country. And I expect that the person who has brought the estimates must also be thinking in that way, so that we find a meeting point. And that is why I always keep saying that our ruling parties must be involved in the budgetary process. And unless that is done, you always have members in the National Assembly trying to put one project or another in their constituencies, or rather for their constituencies. The only measure that will present a panacea against that is the party's involvement.
Okay.
I remember when in 1999, the budget of 2000, and there are many projects, and there were projects, introduced by the National Assembly.
That's right.
At a point during one of our caucus meetings, the president said, okay, since we have paucity of funds, these projects from the National Assembly, let us leave them for the meantime, and we'll propose a supplementary budget in September. And everybody agreed, and the caucus now nominated Alex Ekweme to come to the National Assembly to talk to the members of the National Assembly to pacify them, so that the National Assembly allows the budget, to continue and wait for September, so that those projects could now be incorporated. I think
we just have to pause you here, Honorable Naaba. Of course, like Kingsley indicated earlier on, we've got some tweets here with us. Let's quickly take them. Change to Progress tweets. Problem with our budget is that why should NAS members include projects in budget review? Who provides the estimates for these budgets? Now, NAS members should liaise with MDAs during budget preparation process to include their proposed projects instead of blackmailing executive. Gali Umar Naaba explained how they managed themselves prior to 2001, but what were the outcome of those projects? 85% were abandoned.
Festus Akimboyewa has this tweet. National Assembly should work with the Finance Ministry in order to reach an ultimate compromise before bringing the budget bill to the floor for vote. By the way, it's now the Minister of Budget and National Planning. Now, the problem is National Assembly is tinkering with Nigeria's budget has been selfish and not on the public interest.
And Ostino tweets, federal legislators' allocation of 125 billion naira, about 3 times of that of education, is not acceptable and not value for money due to their conduct.
And we have this from Yakzo Lala. It says 2017 budget saga between the executive and proposals, between the executive proposal by its technocrats and the National Assembly members. It's always a matter of politics and allocation of resources.
Okay, and Douglas Rafa tweets, lawmakers don't use town hall meetings to brief constituents and clarify their appropriate powers like the executive extensively does. I have learned.
This is from Ruben Buba. It says, interesting and exciting your focus today is as interesting and exciting as the personalities you have in the studios. Now, the budget passage also brings good feelings.
And Unable Chukwe Buka tweets, the power of appropriation rests indeed with the National Assembly, who scrutinizes that by executive. That's the law.
And we have this from Dele Jack Solomon. The conceptual disagreement between the executive and the legislature has delayed the passage of the budget each year since 1999. creating room for poor governance.
And Michael Sani or Marco Detroits, the fuse power in our institution has orchestrated the delay of budget approval over the years. Our constitution should be amended.
Austino tweets, lawmakers cannot amend the budget, but can send it back to the executive, who may make adjustments based on lawmakers' concerns. All right, those are some of the tweets that we can take in the meantime. Mr. Akade Ajulo, very quickly, let's take your thoughts on this. There's an issue here that is on the table. Yes, there's no dispute that the executive has a responsibility of preparing and submitting and then lay before the National Assembly budgetary estimates for the following year. Now, the Assembly, that's lawmakers say, yes, our business to consider this, but in considering it, we may vary, we may allocate. In your opinion, does the exercise of that power of variation by the introduction of items not previously considered by the executive now amount to a usurpation of executive powers, because they will now be seen to be introducing and submitting rather than considering?
Very well, you've said it all, and I'm sure even if you ask the Assembly members, their answer will be in affirmative. Affirmative in the sense, of course, in the sense of the fact that it's not that complex for us to know what we are talking about here. And like what I said, we agree this is politics. But one thing I notice most of the time, which is very sad, is that our politicians always believe that things should be done as a way of convenience, but it is not. We have a republic that places premium on rule of law, and that is why, for them to even get there, they have to adhere to that rule of law. That is why they go for election. If not, then anybody can just wishfully think and quickly rush there. And that's why we believe that things must be done very well. And like some minutes ago, I raised one issue, and I wish our legislators should debate on that Physical Responsibility Act of 2007 was passed by them, not Kayode Ajulo, not NTA, not anybody. Now the question is that why, even if you have any ideas of how this thing should be done, what stop you from following the provision of that act? Because that part is part of the Physical Responsibility Act, to help you how to responsibly deals with such thing, even if you want to infuse anything. Why must you do it crudely?
Mr. Kayode Ajulo, I'm sorry, we can't take more questions. We've really exhausted our time allocation. We'd like to thank you, Mr. Kayode Ajulo. Honorable Naaba, I'm afraid I've been told to give you just less than 60 seconds.
You see, the Constitution clearly said that no money should be spent except in the manner prescribed by the National Assembly. When you go to your doctor will prescribe drugs for you. He will ask you to take one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, or two, depending, yes. And you know, this is simply this is simply the issue. You know, the National Assembly has given powers to do whatever it wants with the budget. That's why I said, that's why I said, you see, for us to be able to do, to bring a panacea and an end to all of these problems, we must involve our political parties. Let us work under our political parties. This is all about bringing harmony to governance.
All right, I think Honorable Naaba has made his point, and at this point, we'd just like to appreciate you. Of course, you know, the sum total of what we're talking about is collaboration. We'd like to thank you very much, sir. Former Speaker, House of Representatives, Honorable Umar Gali Naaba. We'd also like to appreciate our friend, Chairman, Senate Committee on Information and Media, Senator Aliyu.
Committee on Media and Public Affairs.
Committee on Media and Public Affairs. Thank you very much for the correction. Senator Aliyu Sabi Abdullahi, and of course our own Mr. Kayode Ajulo, legal practitioner. Gentlemen, thank you very much. And we now take on sports.
The Nigerian Football Federation, NFF Technical